everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cindy Chin. I'm the CEO of CLC Advisors. This is our webinar, The Future of Communities and Transformational Journeys. I want to thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of visitors from around the world, 9 different countries that actually signed up for the webinars from the US, obviously, the United Kingdom, Norway, Switzerland, Germany, Spain, Israel, France, and even Malaysia. So I'm really excited to welcome our guests and to see some repeat guests as well. On that note, I'm very excited about our guest today, who is an amazing person. He is an entrepreneur. He is a powerhouse community builder, and he is also a former elite athlete as well. So I'd like to take the time to quickly introduce Marques Anderson, who's joining us from Southern California. Hi, Marques. Thank you for joining us today. I want to ask you about climate realities and your work in education as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've done and what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, during my time at the World Education Foundation and kind of on-ramping of different solutions, I saw first and foremost that climate is actually affecting people in the global south disproportionately. It's the poorest and most vulnerable people who are being, hit the hardest and have the least resources to fall back on. The reality experienced by people in the global south is not the same as is lived by people in the Western economies. And across the world, it is the people of the global south who suffer from these changes, change in rain patterns, increased droughts and extreme weather events. These are all real-time things that they have to deal with. So these impacts directly affect ability of poor people to sustain their lives as well as their livelihoods. So, these realities force communities to mobilize, where I wrote a statistic a couple of days ago that by 2030, we'll have over 1 billion people displaced just due to climate change. So if we think COVID is a huge issue, how are we going to handle, a global crisis where there's 1 billion people that are displaced? One thing that I also wanted to mention is being in a crisis does create resiliency, and innovation, where people and communities are creating greater, let's say, local management of resources in order to ensure fair access to, sustainable use of water, electricity, and things of that nature. So climate realities are real, and I think it's very important that we look at them in a broader scope than just, Western economies, but also in the global south.
That actually leads me to my next question is the global dynamics, given the current pandemic is being stretched to the limit. Nation states and CEOs are rethinking those globalization strategies. How do you see that unraveling, and what impact do you foresee this having on communities of the future?
Yeah, I think we're in a time where we have the ability to course correct, and as a global community, we're in a time of transition, awakening and evolution, where COVID has not only isolated us, but it's also highlighted how entangled our global community is. With global supply chains under threat, businesses and the stock market taking huge financial losses, as well as our healthcare system being pushed to near collapse. We are being forced to reimagine new pathways forward that include a reevaluation of leadership, this connection to one another on a global scale, and also our symbiotic relationship to the planet. Even in the state of isolation, I'm seeing people come together to envision new systems of education, healthcare, community engagement, product service design, as well as policy. And I also believe that there will be a reorganization of resources. I think companies are starting to think about that in a real way. We are amidst of the largest transfer of generational wealth, where $60 trillion is moving to the next generation, and 70% of that money is going to go to women, which I believe is a more nurturing approach to where resources can empower more sustainable activities. And then further, I believe that, there will be a deconstruction of colonization, where resources will be utilized to develop diverse leadership, where all stakeholders have a voice to contribute to the development of new systems. So those are some of the trends, and I think companies, organizations, leaders are starting to think about these things and how to have a more equitable future moving forward.
Thanks so much for joining us, Marcus. And I love your work with the World Education Foundation and what you're doing, especially meaningful and purposeful work. You can read more about Marcus on our Medium page. We have an article highlighting and spotlighting him and his work. You can find us at CLC Advisors. That's also on our Twitter, our LinkedIn, and Facebook page. And lastly, our next webinar is next week with Christine Fisher, who is a PhD candidate at Thomas Jefferson University in the Immunology and Pathogenesis Department. She is working on vaccine development research, specifically with rabies vaccines, which is also a bat-borne virus. And there'll be a really wonderful conversation next week. I hope you'll join us too, Marcus. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and we hope to see you soon.